to this webinar, which we've titled, sorry, I just have to admit some more people. Okay, welcome to our webinar, which we've entitled Life Beyond Work. The agenda today, we've got 4 speakers, so please just bear with us while we switch between the different presentation slides. But we're going to start with introducing our guest speaker, Judith Wardell, who's from Time of Your Life. She's going to talk a little bit, well, quite extensively actually, about what stages you need to go through in order to prepare for the life that you want to lead. And then we'll move back into our kind of area of expertise, which is the finances. So Graham Laverick will talk a little bit about pension consolidation and cash management. Jonathan, who's one of our chartered financial planners, will talk through cash flow planning and where that plays a part. And then we'll move on to Simon, our investment director, who'll talk a little bit about how to make your finances work for you. And we'll finish off with a very short summary, and then we'll have a question and answer session. If you've got any questions whilst the presentations are ongoing, please feel free to use the chat box, and I can put them to the presenters as and when. But we will take questions at the end of all of the presentations. If you want to pop your hand up, we can come over to you and ask a question. Okay, so without further ado, I'll unshare my screen and we'll hand over to you, Judith.
Lovely. Thanks, Vicky, and welcome to everybody. Unfortunately, I'm hoping you can see me, and in a minute I will share some slides with you, so you should be able to see me and the slides. One of the real downsides for me about this sort of meeting on Teams is I can't see all of you, so forgive me. I hope that you're with me, but it'd be lovely to see your smiling faces and some of your expressions as we go through, but I'm not going to be able to do that. But I am, as Vicky said, going to really start off with nothing to do with finance, but talk about the big picture of what we want out of life. And then Jonathan and the other financial people will make sure that you know how you're going to manage your money and make your money work for you to give you the life that you really want. So let me share my screen or my slides with you. So hopefully you can now, is that working for you, Vicky?
Yep, you can see that, Judith, thanks.
Okay, so yeah, life after work. Yeah, I am going to talk about life after work, but for some of you, you might continue to work, and you'll see as I talk that I don't really like the phrase work or retirement or not work, but I'll explain that as we move into the presentation. So I'm going to start with this question, because I think this is the really big question, and forgive me, on a Friday lunchtime, I'm hitting you with a huge question, but it really is, what do you want from life? And I think it's probably a question that many of us have been asking over the last 12 months anyway, because through the pandemic, our lives have been turned upside down and changed. And I think many of us have said, you know, what's it all about? What do I really want? And right now we're thinking, do I want to go back to what I had before? Do I want to go back to work? Or do I want to work differently? Do I want a different job, a completely different way of life? Or do I actually want to retire and stop work? So it's a big question, but I think it's one that really a lot of us are asking, and probably the reason why some of you have come along today, because you're starting to ask the question and really want to make some choices and decisions about the next step. So that's the big question. Just to help you with that, the Centre for Ageing Better, who looks at how we age well, actually carried out some research and said to people, what do you think makes a good life, and particularly a longer life? And this is the sort of stuff that they came up with, which I hear quite a lot from the people I work with too. So they said, well, it's about health, that heart there. It's about having good physical and mental health and feeling well. That's part of what I want from life. And I need to keep fit and look after myself to do that. It's also about being connected with people, those characters here. It's about friends and family and feeling connected and having good relationships. And they did mention money, but interestingly, most people in the research said it's not about having lots and lots of money or more money or winning the lottery. It's about knowing what you've got and making it work for you. So that's exactly where Jonathan will pick up later on with the lifetime planning. It's about knowing what you've got, not necessarily having more. So that was the essence of the research, but there is always, whenever I ask this question of people, whenever you read research, there's something else that people express by saying things like, I want to be content or happy or fulfilled. So I want a good life. And that's where it gets a bit different, because that's talking about things that we can't buy. It's not something that you can tangibly get hold of. So what is it that we want, and how do we measure it? So really the question is this one. How do you want to feel? And I chose 90 because this is my lovely mom. Last June, she was 90 in lockdown. So we managed to have a sort of outdoor socially distanced celebration. And I just love this picture, because I thought, well, actually, it's about how do I want to feel? What inner feeling of contentment, satisfaction, happiness do I want when I reach 90? And I am planning at least 90. Mum's still with us. I'm seeing her tomorrow. I'm really excited about that. So chances are I'm still going to be here. So this is the question. And I think nice question for us on a Friday. You can think about this over the weekend. How do you want to feel when you're 90? How do you picture yourself at 90? Do you picture yourself like this? Or how do you see yourself? So that's a question, but the answer will be quite hard, because we are actually bombarded continually with the shoulds. Our friends and family tell us, or there's bombard us with what you should be doing, and particularly as you age. So I think there's still a lot of ageism around that says, when I get to a certain age, I'm supposed to do some things, and there are some things I'm not supposed to do anymore, because it's not what you do when you get to that age. So we're bombarded by shoulds, and therefore to think about what do I want when everybody else thinks they know what I should be doing is quite difficult. And just to illustrate that, I decided the other day to Google images of retirement for the presentation. I thought, let's have some images of retirement. And when I Googled it, this is what hit me back. There were loads and loads, but they all followed these themes. And I just chuckled, and I thought, wow, the beach features heavily. The beach, the seaside, is pretty much always there. People in the pictures are doing nothing. They're lounging around in a hammock or a deck chair or walking. Or can you spot the other common link? They're drinking alcohol. Yeah, they've all got a glass in their hand, and it's usually a cocktail. And then the other thing is there are couples. There are happy, smiling couples, always together, always holding hands, and they've quite often got grandchildren. And I thought, well, that's not what my life looks like. That's not my family situation. So this model, the dream that we're sold, doesn't really cut it for many people. And actually, when I work with people who have retired and stopped work a couple of years ago, maybe, and lived this dream, what they say to me is, it's all right to start with. I needed a holiday, but holidays lose their luster when you can do them all the time. And there's something more. And I'm feeling lost now because I'm fed up of lounging around on a beach. So if this isn't happiness, and this isn't what we're supposed to do just because we reach a lovely age of 50 or 60, then, what really is happiness? And the good news for you is I can define that a little bit better for you. Partly because about 20 years ago, people like these people here in these academic books started to research properly what happiness is. So instead of studying ill health or being mad or crazy, psychologists started to say, well, actually, what's happiness and how do we measure it? And the more that they looked at that question, the more we developed research and books and theories about it. And the main finding of all that work is that happiness is both the feeling of pleasure, so that representation of joy, the holiday, the lying on the beach, but it's also about having a sense of purpose. So feeling like I'm working towards something, that there's a point to what I do. What I do is worthwhile to me or to other people. Having that sense of self-satisfaction and feeling valued, useful, is really important. So if we start to think about what do you want out of life, then it's likely to be that you want a mixture of pleasure, joy, fun, but also feeling purposeful as you age and go through the next stage of life. So that's really what we need to try and discover. And I promise that the second part of my session today would be to say, well, how do you find this? So if this is what you're looking for, a happy life that's got a mix of pleasure and purpose, how do you go about finding it? And that's what I will try and do in the next 10 minutes or so. So I asked these questions of myself about 5 years ago when I reached a magic birthday with a 0 on the end of it. And as I started to work through the process of deciding what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, I thought, actually, I can combine the skills and the knowledge that I've acquired through my career and my running my own business to share with other people and help other people to answer the question. So Time of Your Life is a self-guided toolkit, reflective toolkit, where I work alongside you and sort of hold your hand, walk with you through the journey to help you work out what you want from life. And it's got 3 steps. I wanted it to be quite practical. So, okay, if you're going to get from being a little bit confused or not knowing where to go and you want to end up with a plan and a decision, a choice, then let's make it practical. So there are 3 steps: reflect, explore and create. And I'm just going to share with you a little flavour of each of those steps so that you can start to think about these questions yourselves over the next few weeks and the weekend maybe. So let's have a look at that first step of reflect. I guess this is the important message, is it needs time. You need to take some time and effort to think about what you want from life. It often amazes me how long people will spend planning a holiday or moving house or thinking about buying a new car, and yet they never really spend time thinking about their life and planning out their life. So it's going to take some time, it's going to take some effort. I'm here to make it easier for you, but you need to put some effort in and think about things. And what are you going to think about? Well, the sort of questions that I ask at stage 1 are, how do you spend your time and how does it make you feel? Because we've just learnt and observed that if happiness is about feeling pleasure and purpose, then I've got lots to draw on, because I think about how I spend my time today and all the different activities that I do, and I almost score them to say, well, which ones are making me feel most pleasure and which ones actually make me feel really purposeful and valued. And not only have I got how I spend my time today, but you've got the whole of the life that you've lived so far to reflect on as well. And again, we quite often, sometimes because it's a bit painful to relive your past, and some things we'd rather not remember, but we can learn from high points and low points about what really works for us and remind us what we really want in our lives and what's worked in the past. And then just at the moment, I think we've all got lots of learning from lockdown, mainly because we have been doing different things. We've been spending our time differently. We've worked in different ways. We've tried lots of things out. So if we just reflect on that and really think, what is it that I've most enjoyed and got most purposefulness from? What do I want to keep and what do I want to ditch as I move forward out of lockdown? So there's a huge amount of stuff to reflect on there. Having done that, then we move on to step 2. And this is about exploring, and it's about exploring you. So who are you and who do you want to be? Because we can make some choices about perhaps living our next stage of life differently to the one that we've lived just gone. So exploring yourself is really the magic of the programme. And I have to say, where most of the people I work with get real light bulb moments about, oh yeah, actually now I think about it, that's who I am and that's what I want to do, that's what I want to be. So I use a proper professional personality profile to help people with some of these questions, but I'm going to share with you, if you like, a quick and dirty way to ask some questions of yourself, because you can do a lot of the work. So first of all, what are your skills? What are you good at? What do you enjoy doing? What are your strengths? Quite often we become good at things because we enjoy doing them. So reflecting about what you're good at is really important. And most people are very shy about this, but it's trying to be a bit more confident about it. Second question is more difficult, but very, very important, because it's where that sense of purpose comes from. So your why, the reason why you do things, what motivates you, is actually about your personality. We're all very different as individuals. And I'm just going to share a short story with you to try and get across what I'm talking about here. Because this is the message. It's not what you do, but why you do it. So we can all spend our time doing exactly the same thing. So here I am with a group of friends, quite new friends that I made in the village that I live last year. And we're walking the Teesdale Way in day walks, so 10 walks to complete the whole thing from source to sea. And it's quite interesting because I put this suggestion to this group of 4 friends, not really knowing them, not knowing if they were walkers. We were having a socially distanced glass of wine, and I probably had one too many and said, anybody fancy doing the Teesdale Way? And everybody said yes. And I was quite surprised. But after having a couple of walks with them, I can now see that the why, the reason why they each said yes, and what they get from the walk is very different. So just a couple of examples here. You've got Julie here at the front. Julie's motivated and energized by challenges, targets, making things happen. She's always on the go. She's always very busy. And the thought of having a clear target was just, she was there. She wants to walk faster, further, and she's definitely going to finish it and walk every step. Really important to her that it's about the challenge of the walk, the route. Whereas Sue here, completely different. She didn't do the last walk because she wasn't feeling great after her vaccine. She's not bothered about finishing it or completing it. She just loves being part of a team. She looks after us all. She brings cakes. She makes sure nobody's left behind. She walks with the person at the back, makes them feel positive about themselves. She's a carer and a nurturer, and that's why she's doing it. Another example is Jane at the front. She is a real keen walker. So I was surprised that she sort of still wanted to do this, but she said, I always walk with my husband. And I've realised this is about independence. She brings the map, she's very well organised, she's interested in the route, and she's doing it by herself, with us, but independent from the people she'd normally walk with. So we're all there, but we're all there for different reasons. And once you know your why, it makes it easier to think about how you best spend your time. When somebody says to you, do you want to come on this walk with us and walk the Teesdale Way? Do you say yes or do you say no? And knowing why you're saying yes makes it really important. So I know, for example, if we were to say, we've got so far, but we're not going to bother finishing this, Julie would drop out. She would just not want to be part of the team. If we walk too fast and too hard and there's no joy and there's no time for chat, Sue won't come on the next walk. So I know I have to engage them differently. So hopefully that helps a little bit about you thinking about your why. Okay, now we're at step 3. So step 3, you can imagine, is pulling it all together, creating your portfolio life is what I've called it. And I've called it portfolio because the most important thing for me as you start to make changes in your life is to get out of the mentality of work-life. So many people I meet talk about work-life balance. Should I stop work and retire? And the thing I've learned that's so valuable is actually life is a jigsaw puzzle. How you choose to spend your time is a mixture of all sorts of projects, and putting the label work and hobby or life on it isn't very helpful because it starts to give different values to things. So I'm not afraid to say I've got one jigsaw piece, which is my work life, which is coaching people through time of your life. But I do some volunteering at Auckland Castle, and I don't really differentiate between being paid or not paid. They're both purposeful work that I love. So I love it and it's purposeful. So creating a jigsaw is an important message. And obviously making sure that it's your choice. What do you need in your life? What options fit your personality, your motivation? And actually, as you've learned more about yourself, have you discovered some opportunities which you might have dismissed before that have opened up because you suddenly discovered more about who you are and who you want to be? So it's your choice. it's not one size fits all, and that's why it's important to go through the journey and the planning process to arrive at the right solution. And I'm just going to end on another story just to illustrate this, that one size does not fit all. This is one of my learnings, the camper van. The trend at the moment seems to be that, particularly if you're thinking about retirement, you need to buy a camper van. It's obligatory. And you go off round Europe or Scotland, in my case, for weeks or months. Well, we did it, and thankfully I didn't spend lots of money on it and put it in my financial plan. We hired a van for 3 weeks and went around Scotland, and it just did not do it for me. I felt lonely. I felt isolated in my van. I didn't meet anybody. We were so self-sufficient that I never really connected with anybody, so I got a bit lonely. And my husband, who's a planner, and he's not a free spirit, he likes to know where he's sleeping every night. He liked to have a plan. The idea of drifting around without a clear view of where we were going to spend the night was really stressful for him. So absolutely didn't cut it. And when I look back and thought, if I think about all the holidays I've had in my life, what have I most enjoyed? This is my perfect travel experience. It's a group travel experience, trekking in Nepal. The people I'm with are from all over the world, Australia, the States, Canada. So in themselves, they're a fascination to me, to connect with people and learn about them. And then we've got a guide who we learn about the culture of Nepal as we walk. So I've got learning, I've got culture, I've got connecting with people. Beautiful. That's what works for me. It may not work for you. It's working out whether you're a camper van person or a group trekking person, but that's the journey that we're on. So the 3 steps to finding out what happiness is, or finding your happiness: reflect, explore who you are, and then create your own jigsaw puzzle. And if you do want some help, if you'd like me to go on that journey with you and help you answer some of those questions, then obviously please get in touch. And I know we're going to take questions at the end, but just very briefly, I work with individuals and couples. I walk with you through this journey and support you. And it typically takes about 3 months. And don't plan our life in a day. And I'm moving on to link into the team at Prismatic. I work alongside your financial planning team. I want to make sure that what you create is affordable, achievable. And if it's not, we replan, and we plan A, plan B, plan C. So it's really important to have a good financial planner alongside you so that we're not creating dreams that you can't actually fulfill. I'm very happy to talk to you for half an hour, just to explain a little bit more if you'd like to get in touch. So I'm going to leave it there and pass on, I think, to Graham.
Thanks, Judith. I appreciate that.
I'm just trying to work out how I get you back. Sorry.
I can just request control.
I stopped sharing content, so I think that should have taken my slides off.
Yep, that's perfect. Okay. Apologies to those who couldn't get into the webinar, who had just joined a little bit late. We are recording it, so we will be sending out a recording so you can catch up on the beginning of the presentation there. Okay, so I'll just go on to okay, so I'm just going to pass you over to Graham Laverick, who will run through the next part of the presentation.
Thanks, Kate. For those that know me, this bit's going to be short and sweet. So I've done the short straw in terms of the time that I'm going to take. So just wanted to really do my little bit to sow the seeds for Jonathan and Simon, basically, and share some numbers and so forth with you. This is a survey, and there's lots of surveys that are coming out and numbers. This one's recently from Legal & General, and they're saying that there's 2.6 million people over the age of 50 having to expect to work indefinitely. Conversely, some over 50s have been able to benefit financially during the pandemic. You haven't been able to do the nice sort of things in life that you wanted to do. So it's pretty much a mixed bag. We've been talking to some people about early retirement. for a number of years, and it doesn't. So if you could just next slide. So it isn't something that just a lot of people decide here and now. I think the pandemic may well have affected people's judgment calls, but pre-retirement can have long-term repercussions about the sort of things that Judith has just talked about. So it's very, very important that you have a clear understanding of what assets you've actually got. I know to some extent I am just stating the obvious, but it's surprising some of the things that do come out of the woodwork when we are talking to people. So it is all about what other assets you have, property, and what sort of income that you want, not what we want to provide for you when you do eventually decide that you are coming out of paid employment. So the cash flow planning is extremely important. And one of the biggest assets, obviously, and we've been in this business now for over 40 years as a company, is looking at the pension scenario. And again, I'm fairly staggered at these sort of numbers, but it doesn't surprise me that we've got over 20 billion of unclaimed pensions from 1.6 million pension pots. People often have the story of, well, I worked for a company, it went under, so I've lost my pension. It's not necessarily the case, because it might not be with that particular company, or it might have gone into some sort of protection fund. The point I'm trying to make here with these slides is that it's a colossal amount of money, and it is only likely to grow in the future. So one thing that a lot of people say is, well, wouldn't it be easy, Graham, if we had everything in the one pot, pension consolidation? Yes, combining it, a lot of advantages. You've got all in the one place, a lot easier to review. You've got fewer decisions that you have to make, and it's easier to manage. They're the easy sort of decisions. But if life was just so straightforward, it'd be easy. But there are potentially some sort of risks. And one of them is it might have some valuable guarantees behind your existing sort of plan. You might have penalties that have to make it. It might not have the same sort of fund choice as to what you're going into, what you have, and charges overall could be higher or could be lower. There could be a short term when your money isn't invested as well. So when you've got periods of market volatility and you're moving money to providers, it is all things to take into account. So you can't really do this sort of thing justice in a short space of time, but there are lots of things just to take into account, and it's not a win-win-win situation in all particular cases. So what about other things that someone may have when they're looking at taking benefits in retirement? Well, again, you're looking at the amount of money that people might have in cash accounts. And again, a lot of people have saved more money during the pandemic, and maybe have saved that money that they're going to spend on other sort of things. So the sort of things of the camper van. I do actually have a corporate client actually who converts camper vans, and if you go and knock on their door to try and get a camper van in the next 12 months, you'll have no luck because they're fully booked. So people will be wanting to spend money on different sort of things. But interestingly, one of the things that we get increasingly asked about is, well, what can I do with me cash, and what sort of interest rates are available? And just again, this is an independent survey. I think these numbers are maybe not quite as straightforward, because we're looking at the current inflation rate there of 0.4%. It's likely, and for those that have been into our previous seminar with the likes of the Bank of England, they're forecasting that inflation will pick up over the coming years. So even if inflation continues at these sort of levels, and the interest rate scenario that we currently have continues, your net effect on your savings is a minus figure, i.e. that purchasing power of your money today is worth less to you next year. So there are things that you need to consider. That's my little bit done with. I'm going to now hand over to Jonathan so that he can talk you through some of the not complex areas, but some of the issues that we talk to clients about when we're looking at cash flow planning. And then Simon's going to give an oversight in terms of some of the investment processes that we use. So my bit's finished. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Graham. My name's Jonathan Loughran. I'm one of the financial planners at Prismatic Wealth. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about cash flow planning today. So this kind of leads on quite nicely from Judith's section. So you've kind of sat down with Judith, went through a 3-point program and worked out what you want your life to look like. The next step is that affordable? So this is kind of drilling down to the next level. So what cash flow planning looks to do is looks to understand if the financial assets that you've accrued over your working life are sufficient to meet your ideal lifestyle that you've planned. There's a few issues with cash flow planning. There's a couple of unknowns that we don't know how they're going to impact you. So one of them is the cost of your living, which hopefully you can work out with Judith, but that isn't always the same. Plans do change. The big one is how long are you going to live? So Judith said in her bit, she's planning on living well into her 90s. Her mum's lived that long, and she wants to be doing she wants to have her ideal life for the whole of that time. Other people might have a history of less longevity in the family, maybe worked a job that isn't brilliant for health. So the big factor is how long are you going to live? How long are you going to have to make your financial assets last to be able to meet the ideal life that you've planned? A couple of other bits where we come into play a little bit more are the impact of inflation. We've just discussed inflation on cash, and also investment returns as well, which Sam will cover off a little bit further down the line. So the idea with cash flow planning is to allow us to put some assumptions in, kind of see how much your life is going to cost, and then see whether it's actually financially achievable. I can go on the next slide, please. We do this by going through a number of steps similar to what Judith did in her process. So step one is what is your desired lifestyle. So this is essentially what Judith looks to do through a 3-point program. So some of the common things we have people focusing on is looking to not work or work more flexibly, as Judith said. So spending less time at work and more time on things outside. Holidays and travels, normally quite a big one for clients. When they come to us, they want to spend so much time kind of abroad in warmer climes. It's not too bad today, but I know the last few weeks haven't been as nice. And the last one is spending more time with family and friends. Obviously, when you're working, spending time with family and friends is quite difficult. So it's one thing that people focus on. The second step in the process, once you've worked out what your ideal life looks like, is putting a cost on that. So unfortunately, if you want to do lots of nice things, there's normally lots of money to pay out for them as well. So if you're looking to take more holidays, you're going to have to spend more on them. So what you need to do is kind of sit down and work out how much do you want to spend. It might be the case of you want to buy a camper van, how much you're looking to spend on that. Do you want a top spec, or you're happy to have second hand? If you want 3 holidays a year, or are you happy with one? Are you looking to go to Spain, or are you looking to go to Nepal? Those will all have an impact on how much you spend. And they'll be individual for each person. Like Judith said, everyone will have a different idea of what they want to do, and everyone will have a different cost for that, and depending how far they're looking to go and how extravagant they want to be. I can go on the next slide, please. Step 3 is looking at your financial assets. So this is where we come in as financial planners. This is where kind of we take over the reins from Judith. You've planned your ideal life. You've worked out how much that's going to cost. This is the point where we step in and say, right, how can we help you achieve that? So the first thing we do is we look at your financial assets that you've accrued over your life. So that's likely to be state pension, pensions from work, salary and dividends if you are going to continue working, rental income, business sales, inheritances. We collate all that information so we have an idea of what financial assets you've got. The job then we do is we look to see how we can best draw on those financial assets to meet your needs. So in some instances, there might be certain quirks with plans where it's better to leave them later on in life and you're going to get better return and more money back from them. and we make sure we are drawing it from the right places, and we can actually afford to live you can afford to live your life. Step 4 is assumptions. So in order to work out if you're going to have enough, your financial assets are going to provide you with enough money to meet your lifestyle, we unfortunately have to make some assumptions. So like I said, the main one is life expectancy. So if you come to me and say, look, doctors told me I'm not going to be around much longer, we can afford to spend a lot of money in the next year. For most people, we're seeing life expectancy increase year on year. Maybe not this year, but most years that tends to happen. So as life expectancy increases, your financial assets have got you last you longer. So we use some data from the Office for National Statistics to make some assumptions on life expectancy, and we build in an element of a buffer in there as well, because while the average life expectancy is what half the people in the country will live, still 50% people that will live longer than that. The next assumption is around inflation. So I'm sure most people on this call are slightly a little bit older than me. If you just take the cost of a loaf of bread or the cost of a pint of milk, if you look 20 years ago, the cost would have been a lot lower than it is now. So we need to factor in that the cost of your ideal lifestyle will be probably significantly higher in the future than it is today. So we try and build that in. So we kind of factor that in, that while you might spend £20,000 a year now, 10 years down the line, inflation will have increased that cost, so you'll be having to draw more from your financial assets to live your life. And the final assumption is investment returns. So most people will have pensions and investments, and in order to achieve their ideal life, we will have to invest and take some risk. Graham pointed out earlier on, cash returns are at historically low levels, and for most people, a return on cash wouldn't be sufficient to meet their lifestyle. So quite often, taking some investment risk and investing for a higher return allows you to achieve those objectives. So Simon will go through the process later on that we go through to kind of give you an idea of what level of risk you can take and what type of returns we're likely to achieve. And next slide, please. So once we've been through the first 4 steps, we're then in a position to present you a plan. This plan should basically tell you whether or not there's a good chance that your ideal lifestyle that you've created with Judith is achievable. So I've put a little graph on the screen. Sorry if it's a little bit too small, but I'll kind of quickly explain what this is. So each of those bars represents 1 year of your life. The black line along the top is the expenses. That's the cost of your ideal life. So you've sat down with Judith. You said, I want to do X, Y, and Z. This is my plan A. This is the cost of my plan A, and we've plugged that into the system. The bright colours below that line is where we're drawing money from your financial assets to meet those costs. So here, I've just done a quick one. So the dark blue is someone's state pension, the orange is someone's pension assets, and the light blue is their savings and investments. So what we're doing here is just basically saying we're going to have some money coming from the state pension, we're going to draw on the pension, savings and investments to meet your lifestyle. And unfortunately, in this scenario, this chap or lady runs out when they're age 78. Everything beyond that is that red line. So basically we're saying beyond age 78, there's a shortfall between the money that's coming in and the assets we've got and the ideal life that you want to live. So something's kind of got to give. Next slide, please. Hopefully, when we do this, we present your plan, it works. Brilliant. Kind of your plan works. You've sat down with Judith. You've said, this is what I want my life to look like. We've looked at your financial assets and said, that's achievable. That's brilliant. That's exactly what we want. Sometimes it doesn't always work like that. So your plan A might not work. So we've got to look at a few of the different levers we could pull, and maybe some of the trade-offs. I call them dilemmas, where you've got to make a decision and basically, instead of going for your plan A, you go for your plan B. So some of these dilemmas we often have are people decide to either work longer, retire later, or maybe work more flexibly. So someone, instead of saying, I'll stop work completely, they might say, well, look, I'll work 2 days a week. Other people might say, well, I'd prefer to work full time for an extra year rather than working part time for 3 or 4 years. Like Judith said, this is totally individual. This is a decision that you've got to make for yourself to give you the life that you want. Another thing is sometimes you can say, well, I'm willing to forego some of the nice things I do now in order to have the life I want later on. So that's reducing kind of your discretionary expenditure now and increasing your savings and investments, maybe pension contributions, to give you the life you want later on. One of the things that Simon can cover is taking more investment risk. If you take more investment risk, there's a potential you'll get a higher return, which makes it more likely that your plan will be achievable. If you're not willing to do any of those, you might then look at going back to Judith, sitting down with her, going through the part of the process again, and coming up with a plan B, and maybe changing some of the things in there and going for plan B rather than plan A, and doing it that way. Once we've done that, step 7 is review. So no one's life goes in a straight line. No one's life goes as it planned. If it did, that would be brilliant. But most people come down, sit with Judith, go through the plan, come do the cash flow planning with us. That's brilliant. 2 years down the line, they come back and say, actually, my ideal life's changed. It's not the same. So one thing I would say is when we're doing a cash flow is we normally look to review them kind of at least once a year, just to make sure that I understand that I'm helping you achieve the life you want. And if that's changed, we can sit down, replug the figures in and see if it works again. So it's a continual process to make sure that if there are any changes, that your ideal life is still achievable. So basically we're taking this on from the next step to make sure that once you've sat down with Judith and got your ideal life, that you're always going to be able to achieve that and you're not going to leave yourself short at any point. That's a quick tour of cash flow planning. I'll pass on to Simon now, who will take you through a little bit more about investments.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for that, Jonathan. It's really appreciative. Just to assure everyone, I've only got about 5 minutes actually on this slot, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. I think though what I want to do with this time is just have a little think about how do you make your finances work for you all the way through. So far the presentation, we've mentioned a lot about inflation, and I think really anybody in an ideal world would quite like to get the investment returns they want without taking any risk, any risk-free assets or such as cash. So why can't we do that? There's a slide here again that we'll just put back up showing you the current inflation rate and obviously the interest rate you're receiving from cash, which means that as time goes on, the purchasing value of money does decrease. And if we can just pop to the next slide, please, Vicky. What I've done here is just put some more long-term assumptions in place. So we're looking at an investment of £10,000 back in 31st of December, New Year's Eve, 1990. And then what was it worth 30 years later? And if you look at the first row there about inflation, in order to have the equivalent power, of purchasing today, you would need £22,740. So that gives you an idea of that power of inflation just over that 30-year time period. I was going to do a sort of prices right, higher, lower thing actually at the minute, but it turned out to be a bit more challenging to get everyone involved. So I'll just talk through, what these numbers are. And I guess at home, if you want to have a little think about them yourself and see if you're right or wrong when they pop up. But if we have a look at the cash deposit, if we put £10,000 in cash back in 1990, what would that be worth today in a normal deposit with the average interest rates? That would be £31,511. So actually, over the last 30 years, you would have beat inflation just sat in cash. Next, we look at some investments that, as financial planners, we class as lower risk, and that's global bonds and UK gilts. So fixed interest investments, they would have generated, and brought you up to a value of 70,000 for the bonds and 86,000 for the UK gilts, and they're classed as low risk investments. Over a very long time period, they have generated returns. So that's the low risk. In terms of how we use investments, we obviously, and people know this who've been invested with us for a while, we use multi-asset portfolios, and they include a little bit of cash, a little bit of bonds, gilts, and then equities as well. And equities are always known as high risk investments. Obviously, UK is classed as less risk for a UK investor due to the fact that it's in the same currency, whereas global and US, there's a little bit of currency risk as well involved. So if we just have a look at the returns that you're getting out of these assets here, some of these numbers start to become a little bit more impressive. You've got UK equities standard, including obviously dividends reinvested. You get just over £100,000 return in 30 years. The £10,000 on global equities would have risen to 162,000, and then the last figure here, 297,000, is quite extraordinary, really. And I've got to say that there's a caveat in there that a lot of those returns have come back over the last sort of 6 or 7 years with the rise of the global tech companies. But anyone sat would be looking at that and thinking, well, you know, hell's bells, I think I might just go and invest in US equities moving forward, because what's the point in investing in bonds and other things? And the key is there on something that Jonathan was talking about, and that is it's not just about returns, it's about risk as well. And obviously those asset classes such as equities that give you good returns can also lead to some negatives when the markets start to move around a bit and become more volatile. This chart here, I'm not expecting you to sit and read all the numbers. It's called a patchwork quilt, and so those asset classes we were just looking at, they've all been given different colors, and it's got a 10-year horizon there from 2010 to 2020, and it shows which asset classes were the best performers and which the worst over that time periods. And just a few little sort of notes on that. In terms of, if you look at the colour on there, picked out a nice easy one, the yellow colour, that is UK government bonds, so a low risk sort of asset class. And you can see over time, you know, certain years you're getting good returns, other years poor returns relative to other asset classes. It's the same if you look at the light blue colour, that's emerging market equities. So you've had sort of 2011, 2013, 2015, where they were the worst performers. Other years where, you know, they're either top or the middle. And I guess going back to my point about US equities, they're the dark blue on this slide, and for the large majority of the last sort of 7 years, they have been one of the best areas to be in, with the expectation over the fact that they're getting quite highly priced now, and therefore there may be a potential bit of volatility coming through in that area. So what I'm trying to show you here is that unless realistically we've all got a crystal ball, it's really difficult to guarantee where the best opportunity is going to be in the coming year. So what asset managers look to do instead is to build portfolios up that have a little bit of each of those asset classes in. And if we can just pop on to the next slide, please, Vicky. What you can see there is I put two little graphics on pie charts for cautious and balanced portfolios. The cautious portfolios are low risk, obviously, and really simply with those colours, the dark blue is your equity risks, that's the higher risk investments, and the other colours are the bonds, fixed interest and property. And if you have a look really simply, the dark blue on the left hand side in the cautious portfolio is about 30% of the portfolio, so that's a low risk investor. But the key I want you to have a little look at is when you compare that to the right hand side for balanced, yes, you've got more equities in there, you've got more of that dark blue, but the actual segments of pie underneath haven't lessened. And I think that's something that we do lose a little bit sometimes when we talk to clients. If I as a planner ever go to a client and say, well, do you want to go into high risk investment? Everyone's, well, no, thank you very much. You know, I'm coming to retirement. I want to just be easy on my risk. And I think our language, we have to use low, mid, high risk. But actually what we're talking about is just increasing the level of equity exposure in a portfolio, but still the actual number of underlying investments hasn't changed that much. You're still diversified globally, you're still diversified in asset classes around the world. And therefore, what we're just talking about is, well, how much more exposure have you got to an asset class that might give you a little bit more return in the long run? But you've got to understand that that does increase the risk in terms of the volatility of that investment over time. And that's how much it'll move up and down according to market conditions. So the really quick run through there, I guess, is, you know, what we look at in terms of portfolio planning. How that links into cash flow is obviously, once that plan's been put together, it's trying to look at, well, how can you achieve the plan with the minimum risk possible? And your plan might be, you know, to have 20 grand a year for the rest of your life. It could be to have that and leave £500,000 behind for the next generation. It could well be, you know, 10 grand a year for the next 5 years to pay for something else. And the reason I'm talking through that is because the portfolio you're placed into isn't about, well, let's make as much money as we can, unless that's your objective. We've got to look at what you're trying to achieve. Is it right for you? What's your normal, your natural attitude to risk? And also, once we understand that, the timescale for the plan. Once that's occurred, we then select the correct investment from our panel, which will match that attitude to risk, that will then be placed into the cash flow plan that Jonathan was talking about to help you try and achieve that retirement goal that you're looking for. I think the key is round it as well. Just a little aside, is that I was on a conference last sort of December time, and the organisers there were talking through risk and talking through about attitude to risk and what is the problem with people taking too high a risk in retirement. But also there was a good 10-15 minutes discussion around the risk of people not taking enough risk, and that risk is about people with a lot of money sat in cash because historically they've earned 3 or 4% in cash that now aren't earning that amount of money, and therefore will that money erode over time, not just the purchasing power, but actual, the actual real volume of the money. Will that be enough to see you through retirement? And I think that's something that, as a group of planners here, we do try and discuss with clients, and obviously try to understand what your asset base is like overall and how you can use those different pots at different stages in your life. So yeah, that's all I really want to cover off on the investment side. So you'll be pleased to know on a Friday afternoon. I didn't want to go into too much depth. And I'll hand back over to, I think it's Vicky. Is that right?
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Simon. Thank you. Okay, so just to summarise, I found this quote which we have in one of our brochures actually, and that is, when Alice asks the Cheshire Cat, "Would you tell me please which way I ought to go from here?" the cat replies, "That depends a good deal on where you want to get to." And it's the same for all of us. If we heard from Judith, the first stage in achieving your long-term goals is to have clarity in what they are. And she talked quite a lot there about it being bespoke and about you and about not what you think you should be doing, not what your friends are doing, and ensuring that they are your goals. And once you've got those goals kind of, you kind of determined what they are, then we can kind of step in and put together a financial plan to help you achieve them. So that's really, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, especially in our financial planning side of things, but it's just given a kind of brief oversight as to what is involved in kind of helping you achieve your goals. We're going to move on to some questions now. I just want to pop in very briefly about our next webinar, which is going back to a bit more technical, but it's about the freezing of the lifetime allowance and what the alternatives are for people who are hit with the problem of the lifetime allowance freeze. So we're holding that in conjunction with Puma Investments on Tuesday, the 18th of May. So we will be sending out invites to those clients that it's applicable to. But just want to then see if we've got any questions, and I'm just going to go back in because I know I've had a question on the chat. So let's just go back. Okay, so one of the questions on the chat there is, redundancy risk is higher for many at the moment, with challenges getting another job due to the economic situation, especially for over 50s. What advice would you give to those who are dealing with this uncertainty? I don't know who wants to take that question.
I'll answer it, Vix.
Yeah.
I think it comes back to all the bits that we've talked about here. People are often very concerned about the financial implications, and I fully understand that. But it is all about sitting down and talking to somebody, and it's quite often surprising that when people come into our office initially and a little bit caught in the headlights in terms of, well, is this a decision that's been forced on me, or is it actually a decision that is being forced on you, but actually you're quite glad of it, but you don't really actually know about the numbers? It is all about sitting down and talking through. It's not what we want you to achieve, it's more about what you want to achieve. And certainly that's a fair bit of what Judith talks about what you actually want out of life, and trying then to make the financial bits, sit alongside all of that. The worst thing is just to bury your hand in the sand. It's easy to say that and then just say, well, I'll pick up all of my finances a week before I retire. Have you left it too late? Not necessarily, but it's all about, planning for your future. more than anything. What I would say is that the cash flow plan that we do for Klein is pretty much out of date within a few months, because people's lives do change and people's expectation. I've just had an email from a client during this presentation who wanted to give some money away to his son and daughter. That wasn't on the agenda a fortnight ago when I spoke to them, but so he's asked the question of me, how is that going to affect what we discussed previously? And it's things like that. So have a conversation with someone is what I would say, and preferably look at these numbers in terms of the cash flow planning, bit what Simon said in terms of the investment risk, just to see whether it fits in with all of your requirements. But as I say, it's not an all fit for every client. We look at this on a bespoke basis.
Thank you.
And Vicky, I can probably add to that, and thank you, Helen, for the question. I do know Helen, so hi. Happy to talk more about this, but I think it's turning the risk. I mean, I saw the question as though it's more about finance because of the word risk, because on a personal basis, it's turning the risk into an opportunity. Because actually, jobs aren't, nobody's got a job forever, I think, these days. We can't assume that, and the economy is so volatile, but it's just taking that opportunity to say, actually, how could I use my skills in a different context? The important question is, how much money do you need to earn for the rest of your life? And that's where, when we work together, that's really helpful, because that says, do I need a full-time job at a certain salary, or do I need a flexible job? How much do I need to earn is the first question, and then there's the opportunity that opens up to just look at different opportunities.
Thanks, Judith. Any more questions? I'm sorry I can't see everybody, so if you've got a hand up or anything, I might not be able to see it, but I don't think we have any more questions, and I'm just conscious of time, and we're nearly right on 1 o'clock there. So thank you everybody for attending. Hopefully I will have recorded this and it will work, and we'll be able to send it around, but we'll also forward some of Judith's contact details and obviously our contact details, and if you want to discuss any aspect of it in further detail, just get in touch. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending, and I hope you have a very nice weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.